Have you ever looked at some Puerto Rican people and you think, wow, they look like they have some African features. The coily hair, the browner skin tone, the fuller lips, the bone structure. Well, those are features that are mirrored throughout the African diaspora. And so you might be saying, well, how is it? Well, it's true. The fact is, African ancestry has been woven into the Puerto Rico's identity. Starting back in the early 1500s, Spain began importing enslaved Africans to Puerto Rico. So this is a quick history lesson for you all. First of all, you got to know Puerto Rico is a Caribbean island and is located east of the Dominican Republic, okay? So before Europeans arrived, it was a home to the Taíno people, who are an indigenous group, okay? And they called the island Puerto Rican, meaning land of the valiant Lord. But in 1493, Christopher Columbus, yes, he claimed Puerto Rico for Spain. Get that? And so in doing that, that began more than 400 years of Spanish colonial rule. The Spanish settlers established towns, plantations, and trade routes. But just like in much of the Caribbean, the colonizers now quickly turned to the transatlantic slave trade to build their wealth. And that is where, starting in the 1500s, Spain began importing, taking enslaved Africans from Africa and bringing them to Puerto Rico. These Africans were brought primarily from West and Central Africa. So you got present-day regions like Congo, Angola, Senegal, and Nigeria. And so they were forced, these Africans were forced to work the sugarcane plantations, also in the gold mines and farms and in households. So do you see how you have the Africans intermingling with the indigenous? And then that is how many of the Puerto Ricans look. I mean, some of their hair is just as coily as black Americans. You understand? Because of the African ancestry that's in their DNA. So here's the key. Unlike what many people think, Africans were not a small presence. They were a major part of the island's population. Let me reiterate that, because so many times, and even many Puerto Ricans themselves, either they don't want to admit it, because unfortunately anything seen as black, whether if it's in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, any other place, they deem it as less. And so you find many Puerto Ricans, just like many Dominicans, who refuse to state or show that they have African ancestry in them. And they do. By the and I'm not saying all, but a large majority. You got to remember, by the mid 1500s, Africans and their descendants made up a large segment of Puerto Rican society. And over the centuries, these Africans didn't live separately from everyone else, y'all. They lived with them, right? They worked, they loved, they intermarried, and they had children with both the Spanish colonizers and the Taíno people. Okay? And so this mixing created a tri-racial ancestry that still defines Puerto Rico today. So it gives you the Taíno, the indigenous. It gives you the Spanish, who were the European, and the African from the West and Central Africa. This is a tri-racial ancestry. So this blending didn't just happen in one generation, you all. It unfolded over hundreds of years. And it shaped everything from the genetic makeup to the appearance of Puerto Ricans. You ever notice why even in larger cities, anywhere, Puerto Rico, especially in New York, Chicago, it's like the Puerto Ricans and blacks, they just get along. Because it's part of each other. We share DNA. DNA studies consistently show that most Puerto Ricans have a combination of African, European, and indigenous ancestry, with African heritage being a central pillar, especially in coastal and rural regions. I'm going to reiterate that for the Puerto Ricans who don't want to acknowledge your blackness. Okay? DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Yes, these studies consistently show that most Puerto Ricans have a combination of African, European, and indigenous ancestry, with African heritage being a central pillar, especially in coastal and rural regions. So black folk, again, you know me, I'm already damn near thinking we should boycott the NFL. But however, when I say our brother Bad Bunny will be performing, we black people can support him. If you're still watching, support him, because I don't know where he falls on what percentage black is in him and African ancestry, but he's got it in him. That coily hair. Yeah. All right. So, and you can see this heritage in a lot of things. Let's talk about the skin tones. Puerto Rican skin tones range from very fair to deep brown, often with golden or reddish undertones seen across the diaspora. Let's talk about their hair texture. I just talked about it. The hair textures go from very straight to wavy to coily to curly, a clear legacy of African lineage, right? Let's talk about the facial features. Many of them have full lips, broad and prominent noses, and high cheekbones that reflect what? African and indigenous ancestry. And then body types, including curvier builds, right? Strong bone structures also show the diaspora connections that are shared with black communities throughout the Americas. So these features aren't just coincidental diversity, y'all. They are living evidence of 500 plus years of African presence on the island, starting in the colonial era. So, African influence in the culture. Let's talk about the culture. Despite the brutal realities of slavery, Africans in Puerto Rico held onto their culture. They did. They transformed it and infused it into the island's identity. Let's talk about the music and dance. Let's talk about Mamba. Mamba is one of the oldest musical traditions on the island, created by enslaved Africans in the 17th century as a form of resistance, communication, and celebration. The dancer leads the drummer, symbolizing freedom and agency. Then let's talk about Plena, sometimes called the newspaper of the people, came later and blended African rhythms with Spanish influence, often used to share community news and stories. Let's talk about the food. African cooking styles shape Puerto Rican cuisine. Dishes like mofongo, mashed plantains mixed with garlic and pork are directly inspired by what? West African fufu, right? Techniques like frying plantains, using okra, and blending robust flavors came from African culinary traditions, y'all. And let's even talk about spirituality. African spiritual beliefs were often blended with Catholic religion to survive their colonial rule. So this produced syncretic practices similar to Santeria in Cuba, where African deities were aligned with Catholic saints. Elements of healing, music, and rituals from Yoruba and the Congo tradition still influence Puerto Rican life, spiritual life today. And let's talk about the language, right? African languages shaped Puerto Rican Spanish vocabulary. It shaped the rhythm, it shaped the expressions, giving it a distinct Caribbean flavor that sets it apart from European Spanish. So again, you all, let's talk about the resistance and the intermarrying and the legacy. Africans in Puerto Rico were not just passive laborers. They resisted, they survived, and they transformed the island too. There were multiple slave uprisings throughout the 16th and 19th centuries. And some Africans did escape and join the Taíno communities in the mountains, forming maroon societies, independent, self-sustaining black communities. But others became artisans, farmers, soldiers, or leaders, integrating into every layer of Puerto Rican society. So what am I saying, y'all? What I'm saying is, next time you hear the rhythm of the bamba or you see beautiful diversity of Puerto Rican faces, remember you're witnessing centuries of history, of African influence alive in the present. So Puerto Rico's story is a diaspora story, y'all, and Africa is at the heart of it. And so my beautiful Puerto Rican brothers and sisters, whether you want to believe it or not, this is history. I'm not making this up because I want everything to be about black people. You know, blame Christopher Columbus and all the other colonizers who went and entrapped Africans and brought them over to work the plantations in Puerto Rico. So, again, black people, we touch everybody, don't we? And that's a beautiful thing. And Puerto Ricans, you're no better than us, and we're no better than you. And those of you who speak Spanish, that's a beautiful thing. But don't think that just because you may speak that language that you're better than us, because the reality is your DNA is in me and mine is in you. All right? So y'all be blessed. Continue to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And hey, all this can be found in the library. All this can be found online. All of this information you might be saying, this sister is sitting here making this up. No, it's real. And I think you should know this, so that when you're watching Bad Bunny up there performing and you see him moving and gyrating and dancing, just know that it was influenced by African ancestry. All right? And that's not to take away from the indigenous, the Taíno people or anything like that either, because it all made a beautiful melting pot of beautiful people. All right, talk to you soon. Be blessed. Bye.